When you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because... Do you feel that I'm feeling, do you feel that I'm being free and I'm thinking free?
I actually don't think you're thinking anything. I think what you're doing right now is actually the absence of thought. And the reason why I feel like that is because Kanye, you're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to believe whatever you want. But there is fact and real world, real life consequence behind everything that you just said. And while you are making music and being an artist and living the life that you've earned by being a genius, the rest of us in society have to deal with these threats to our lives. We have to deal with the marginalization that has come from the 400 years of slavery that you said for our people was a choice. Frankly, I'm disappointed, I'm appalled, and brother, I am unbelievably hurt by the fact that you have morphed into something, to me, that's not real.
The Voice UK. Will.i.am is planning to get back in the recording studio and also working on a special design project, and he joins us now. Always lovely to see you.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Got to ask you first off about Kanye West. He's an extraordinary maverick character. He's been on this tweet storm for a week now. Last night enraged a lot of people, a lot of African Americans, by saying slavery for 400 years was a choice. What did you feel when you heard about that?
That broke my heart. Because I thought about my grandma, who was born in 1920, and her connection with her mom, who raised her, who was born in the late 1800s, and my grandmother's grandma, who was a slave. And when you're a slave, you're owned. You don't choose if you're owned. When you're a slave, you're deprived of education. That's not choice, that's by force.
Kanye West recently said that slavery was a choice. Do you have any reaction to those comments?
I'm disappointed. I'm sad. You know, I think we all here can agree that Kanye is a genius, and like some of the music that he's made has been like, I mean, he's an icon. You know, you go way back. I mean, he's been doing what, I don't know what he's doing right now, but it's not it. This is not it. So I'm sad. Am I surprised? I've seen it. I feel like I've seen it coming. I don't know. Is everybody else surprised? Like, did we not see this happening before our eyes? But it's still sad. Yeah.
No. Think before you speak. That's all I got to say on that.
Do you have any reaction to him?
No. I will not get into that. Sometimes you just gotta stop listening to it, dude. You know what I'm saying? So, no, there's not a whole lot I can really say about that situation. I think that guy from TMZ nailed it. I think he nailed it right on the head. I think that was brilliant. I watched that like 17 times.
I can say that it has created amazing content on Twitter, because those clapbacks are a thing of like, I can't tell you. I've enjoyed every single one of them, because the absurdity of some of the comments that I've been hearing of late is just, it's unreal. But I was so appreciative of Van on TMZ for chin-checking him a little bit. That was great.
I just need Kanye to read a book, like do some history lessons, man. Like at this point, it's just like, what are you gonna say today, man? That's false. It's dangerous what he's doing, but I pray for him. I pray for the brother.
I mean, I think my boy Van said it all on TMZ. Like, I mean, you did it. When that came out of his mouth, I was just like, well, what universe are you living on right now? But yeah, it was disappointing, and I was appalled. Like, it was just I was heartbroken, because we love Kanye. Like a lot of people saying it myself, I miss the old Kanye. I do. I don't know what's going on.
Dear Kanye, our historical history and culture, as far as slavery is concerned, is not a choice. Get woke.
Kanye said that slavery was a choice. What do you got any response to that?
I just kind of ignore him because...
No, I don't. I don't have no response to that. Yeah.
Now, Kanye followed up by tweeting, "To make myself clear, of course, I know that slaves did not get shackled and put on a boat by free will. My point is for us to have stayed in that position, even though the numbers were on our side, means that we were mentally enslaved." Kanye, look, there were laws that were put in place that said we were less than human. And so when you have laws that say you're less than human, they don't let you in a room. They don't let you in a door. You are meant to live in a different way, like an animal oftentimes. So you have to keep in mind that, you know, as we come around and fix these laws and say, listen, it's not okay for you to tell me I can't vote. I'm going to fight. And white folks got on board and everybody got on board and said, this is not okay. We're all American citizens. We should all be able to vote. So that was a change. You change the laws, you change the mentality, but you can't pretend like people are just saying, I'm going to stay here because this feels really comfortable for me. Yeah. No.
That is the most ignorant thing that I've ever heard come out of the mouth of an African American. It is disgraceful. It is abhorrent. It's repulsive. It's an insult to our ancestors. What this man said, to imply, to state matter-of-factly that ancestors who were raped, maimed, murdered, that was by choice, is one of, if not the greatest insult to black people that I have ever heard come out of the mouth of a black person. I'm ashamed of Kanye West and what he said. And I want to take this moment to applaud that kid, I believe his name is Van Lathan, for TMZ, who came back and responded to Kanye West in such an eloquent and brilliant way that it forced Kanye West to go over to him and apologize. He was absolutely right in every word that he uttered, in the tenor that he did in expressing it. Not to mention the fact that he also told Kanye, I don't need your apology, I don't need your hug, I need you to be more responsible with the ignorant rhetoric that's coming out of his mouth. I don't know what has happened to Kanye West, I don't know what is wrong with this brother, but what he said was so incredibly insulting to African Americans and black people the world over that the ultimate emotion that rakes through my soul is sadness. Sadness that this brother would feel the need to say what he said. He has no business being a part of any kind of race summit whatsoever. Donald Trump, he's the president. Colin Kaepernick, his work and his words and his efforts speak for itself, no matter what you agree with or disagree. Kanye West needs prayer. He needs help. I don't know where from or who should provide it, but clearly he is not the individual that should be a part of this race summit. That's all I have to say about it.
Now to Kanye West. Stephen A., Kanye West is not an intellectual. He has not been rigorously formally educated, nor is he, if he is a deep thinker, then that he is not able to articulate it in any kind of public speech unless you include kind of interpreting lyrics where you can have a debate about that. But the idea of mental slavery goes back to, even predates Marcus Garvey. But you know that the Bob Marley song, Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds. That was taken really from a Marcus Garvey speech in 1937. You know, others can emancipate us physically, but none but ourselves can emancipate our minds. And Kanye here seems to either be clumsily referring to that idea, or else without rigorous formal education, or much at all, it seems to me, is stumbling upon this idea himself and articulating it poorly. I think that's what's going on now.
But here's what I think Kanye was saying. Look, man, we are slaves again. How are you a slave now? You got a chain around your brain, and you're allowing your education or your miseducation to make you think you're better than your little brother who doesn't have it. With education comes an arrogance that makes you think you know what you don't know. Because all the education we've received, we have never used it to put our people's feet on a strong economic foundation. So he's trying to break chains of sex. I'm hoping soon to talk to some of my brothers who have let the pleasure of sex and the pain of black life drive them to an insanity, if you follow what I'm saying. So he's breaking through those kind of chains. He wants to break those chains that bind him to this or that. He wants to be a free thinker. He hasn't gotten there yet, but he made this I would call it misspoke.
Mr. Lowe. Tell us about your father.
Why don't you tell us something about your father?
We're trying to get to know each other, Mr. Lowe.
I was trying to get to know you, Mr. Tolson.
Well, I'm not the one on the debate team.
Are we not engaged in a debate right now?
All right. I'll take the affirmative. Take the meanest, most restless nigger. Strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, female niggers, and nigger infants. Tar and feather him. Tie each leg to a horse facing in opposite direction, set him on fire, and beat both horses until they tear him apart in front of the male, female, and nigger infants. Bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger males within an inch of their life. Do not kill them, but put the fear of God in them, for they can be useful for future breeding. Anybody know who Willie Lynch was? Anybody? Raise your hand. No one? He was a vicious slave owner in the West Indies. The slave masters in the colony of Virginia were having trouble controlling their slaves, so they sent for Mr. Lynch to teach them his methods. The word lynching came from his last name. His methods were very simple, but they were diabolical. Keep the slave physically strong, but psychologically weak and dependent on the slave master. Keep the body, take the mind. I and every other professor on this campus are here to help you to find, take back, and keep your righteous mind. Because obviously you have lost it. That's all you need to know about me, Mr. Lowe. Clap.
Harriet Tubman was an incredibly brave African-American woman. She sacrificed her own life, and she freed probably over 1,000 people. And she said she could have freed a lot more if they had known they actually were slaves. People. And she said she could have freed a lot more if they had known they actually were slaves.
Well, I'm going to use your term.
Okay.
Native blacks.
Right.
So there is hatred and distrust within the community. There is hatred of blacks, just as an observer, more so than any other population of people by large societies of people around the world. Now, there are a lot of reasons, that hatred is generated in part because of how the culture is exported, how blacks are seen through, in so many negative ways, through culture. So we observe all of that, but I'm asking you, the PhD, is for you to weigh in on why there is such hatred towards black people.
Again, a good question. There are about 4 basic reasons why they hate black folk. And a lot of it springs from our inappropriate behavior patterns to justify it. The initial reason why the dominant white society and other groups are against black folk is because in their culture in Europe, that black folk typified just the opposite of them. When people look in the mirror, people always love that which is closest to them, rock. And white folk look in the mirror and says, we are whites and they are blacks in color. So therefore, what am I going to love? They're going to love themselves first. And they love, so that therefore whiteness became to symbolize goodness, fairness, angelical, honesty, everything you could name, something that's valued. They valued white skin because they had white skin. Blacks, on the other hand, signified things are just the opposite. Things that were evil, dirty, odious, devilish, foolish, and ignorant. And so that was the first thing that began on black folk. The second thing that began to handicap black folk is once they enslaved black folk, they branded them. Slavery branded black folk because in those European countries, in the Asian countries, they had codes of conduct that says anytime somebody offends you or your family, you're blind or you have an obligation to defend yourself and fight. In Europe and in Asia, they had what's called dueling. You got out with a sword and dueling and fought it out. Or in the United States, in the West, they had shootouts, cowboys going out in gunfights because you offended them. But see, in black folk never defended themselves. And what whites said in their psyche is there's no honor in being a slave. There's nothing, and so consequently, if you allow us, anybody else, to enslave you for 460 years, we have no respect for you, no appreciation for you, we don't value you. And what whites said in their psyche is there's no honor in being a slave. There's nothing, and so consequently, if you allow us, anybody else, to enslave you for 460 years, we have no respect for you, no appreciation for you, we don't value you. And
you truly believe, then, that nonviolence is the sole, the universal answer to injustice and oppression?
Very definitely. Very definitely. I feel that nonviolence, organized, I should say, organized nonviolent resistance is the most powerful weapon that oppressed people can use in breaking loose from the bondage of oppression. Now, the other method that one might use is that of resignation or acquiescence. But I think that is just as bad as violence, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good.
It has been suggested also that this movement preaches a gospel of violence.
No, the black people in this country have been the victims of violence at the hands of the white man for 400 years. And following the ignorant Negro preachers, we have thought that it was godlike to turn the other cheek to the brute that was brutalizing us. And today, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is showing black people in this country that just as the white man and every other person on this earth has God-given rights, natural rights, civil rights, any kind of rights that you can think of when it comes to defending himself, black people we should have the right to defend ourselves also. And because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad makes black people brave enough, men enough to defend ourselves no matter what the odds are, the white man runs around here with the doctrine that Mr. Muhammad is advocating violence when he's actually telling Negroes to defend themselves against violent people.
I see. Well, the Reverend Martin Luther King preaches a doctrine of nonviolent insistence upon the rights of the American Negro. What is your attitude toward this philosophy?
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attacks of the Klan in that day.
But the goal of Dr. King is full equality and full rights of citizenship for Negroes.
The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to give Negroes a chance to sit in a segregated restaurant beside the same white man who had brutalized them for 400 years. The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to get Negroes to forgive the people who have brutalized them for 400 years by lulling them to sleep and making them forgetting what those whites have done to them. But the masses of black people in America today don't go for what Martin Luther King is putting down. As you said in one of your articles, it's psychologically insecure, something of that sort. I forget how you put it. But you didn't endorse what Martin Luther King was doing yourself.
I do not reject his goals of full integration and full equality rights for American citizens. Do you reject these goals?
If you don't think that he's walking on the right road, I'm quite sure you don't agree that he'll get to the right place. And if you would classify his method as psychologically unrealistic, I think that if a man's method is psychologically unrealistic, which means the road or the means or the method that he's using, I think as a psychologist, you would be very doubtful that he would reach the right goal.
There is one correction, Mr. Malcolm, I'd like to make here. In that same piece that you're quoting from, I said that his methods are effective. His philosophy of love of the oppressor, I thought, was psychologically burdensome.
The last thing they did was say that now is that because you let us do this to you, we hate you because but for the last thing is because you're weak people. You spend all your time trying to get along with us. There was a white doctor in about 1850 says in one speech, he says, real racist white doctor, he says, don't ever worry about black folk. They'll never come after you or take up arms against you. All they want to do is be at their beck and call, to be a hand servant, to wait on us, to help us, to comfort us.
The most forgiving people on earth.
Most forgiving person on earth. He says you're always forgiving, compromising, acquiescing, and going on kissing on people, trying to get along with them and being acceptable. And that's what happened with the whole civil rights movement. And so now when these civil rights leaders always want to beg and march and demonstrate and say, just please accept us. Let us come into your home, come in your school, in your neighborhood. White said, we don't have any respect for you.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
If you truly are sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even bad for my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but Can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
At 9:05 this evening, we received a call of a shooting that had occurred at the church here on Calhoun Street. There were 8 deceased individuals inside of the church.
But the 9th victim, Alana's grandfather, was still breathing. He suffered multiple gunshot wounds and was rushed to the hospital. As Alana waited to hear if he had made it through surgery, the reality of what had happened began to sink in.
Police are still looking for the shooter. He's described as a clean-shaven white male in his early 20s.
The only reason someone could walk into church and shoot people praying is out of hate.
The Department of Justice has opened a hate crime investigation into this shooting incident.
How did this happen? Why did this happen? I can't believe this happened. They're God's people. I wanted him to be able to survive this situation. I wanted to be able to just talk to him one more time.
Hours later, Alana got another call. Her grandfather didn't make it. And 8 victims became 9.
I was devastated to lose someone to a race crime like that, especially in the middle of prayer. It makes you angry to think that we're still in that same place of hatred that we were years and years ago.
The suspected gunman has been identified as 21-year-old Dylan Roof. He was captured just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, 12 hours after opening fire on a historic black church.
The only thing that I could pray for was peace for my family and for the city. Racial tensions rise and the community is divided. That's what I expected.
And I will tell you, there's a lot of prayer in this state. And so you are going to see all of us try and lift these 9 families up in prayer because they need us.
The blood of the Mother Emmanuel 9 requires us to work.
The world cannot understand why we're not crying at this moment, why we're not bitter.
2 days after the shooting, a bunch of us marched to Mother Emmanuel. We were clapping and singing spirituals like, "Victory is mine, victory is mine, victory today is mine." As we were getting up to the church and singing these songs, we heard this foreign sound coming from the middle of the street. And we turned around. The Jewish community of Charleston made a circle in the middle of the street and did the Kadash, which is their Hebrew prayer of the dead, as a gesture of solidarity with us in that tragedy.
The following day, the surviving families came together for Ruth's bond hearing. With emotions running high, a few of the family members approached the front of the courtroom to confront the man who had murdered their loved ones.
You took something very precious away from me.
I would never talk to her ever again. I would never be able to hold her again. But I forgive you.
I forgive you and my family forgive you. But we would like you to take this opportunity to repent. Give your life to the one who matters the most, Christ.
Every fiber in my body hurts, and I'll never be the same. But may God have mercy on you.
I'm certain that at the time that my grandfather served in the Army, and at the time that he even grew up, that he was mistreated simply because of the way that he looked. He never in his life would have been the kind to harbor negative feelings. He had to forgive them so that he could go on and live in love.
The very fact that you find students all over the world today are standing up for their rights and fighting for their rights. But here in America, the so-called Negro students have allowed themselves to be maneuvered under a tag of sit-in. Actually, I guess it describes it. The name describes its nature. It's a passive thing, and if their goal is integration, it's not a worthwhile one. But if their goal is freedom, justice, and equality, then that's a worthwhile goal. If integration is going to give the black people in America complete freedom, complete justice, and complete equality, then it's a worthwhile goal. The holding this integration bottle and dangling it in front of the Negroes in America today has actually disabled them, or it has nullified their ability to stand up and fight like a man for something that is theirs by right, rather than to just sit around and beg and wait for the white man to make up his mind that they're worthy to have this type thing. I think that this is, in my opinion, why we disagree with the sit-in movement. If they are willing to wait for another 100 years for the white man to change his mind to accept them as a human being, then they're wrong. But if they're willing to lay down their life tonight or in the morning in order that we can have what is ours by right tonight or in the morning, then it's a good movement. But as long as they're willing to wait for the white man to make up his mind that they are qualified to be respected as human beings, then I'm afraid that all of their waiting and their planning is for naught. Until the black man here in America is connected or reestablished or given some knowledge of his existence prior to coming here to America, his own appraisal of himself will be so low that he'll actually think that the white man is doing him a favor to let him be here in America no matter what his status is. And he also, and this is one of the reasons today why he fights so hard, some of them, to sit down next to the white man. They actually think that the white man is the personification of perfection, and whenever they're allowed to go live in his neighborhood or sit in his restaurant or mingle or socialize with him, that they have attained, that they have made progress. But when they go back and study the history of their own people and the accomplishments of their own people, the civilizations and cultures, black civilizations and black cultures that existed in Africa at a time when the whites in Europe were living a cave-like existence, then immediately their appraisal of themselves begins to go higher. And they don't think that to beg somebody to mingle with them in this country is any kind of progress whatsoever. The black man in America is the only one who is encouraged to be nonviolent, or the black man in Africa, or the black man in Asia. Never do you find white people encouraging other whites to be nonviolent. Whites idolize fighters. They idolize the Hungarian freedom fighters who came to this country and right now can work on jobs that the sit-in students can't get, can live in neighborhoods that the sit-in students can't live in, and can go into public places that the student sit-ins can't go, because they are fighters. Everyone loves a fighter. They respect the fighter. But at the same time that they admire these fighters, they encourage the so-called Negro in America to get his desires fulfilled with a sit-in stroke, or a passive approach, or a love your enemy approach, or pray for those who despitefully use you. This is insane.
And we feel as Muslims, until we see white people practicing this nonviolence, take Pearl Harbor. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the American white man didn't say, pray for the Japanese and let them now bomb Manhattan or Staten Island. No, they said, praise the Lord, but pass the ammunition. But and if anybody comes along like Mr. Muhammad and begins to point out uncompromisingly in blunt terms that don't need diplomatic language that can be misinterpreted, and he begins to point out these atrocities and crimes that have been committed against black people here in America today, the white man can never deny the fact that he's guilty, but he'll always say, well, forget the past and let's look forward. But the only people who are told to forget the injustices that have been done to them are the black people. When the black man here in America begins to stand up and speak about the crimes that are committed against him throughout America every day, no let-up, just different forms, immediately a black man who dwells on that is considered a racist, considered an extremist, or considered someone who is advocating a doctrine that will bring about violence and bring about a deterioration in the so-called good relations that are supposed to be developing between black and white in this country.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. Years ago, we had the church. That was only a way of saying we had each other.
But now, I don't know, it's a funny thing. It put hate in your heart.
The Knights of Columbus were real headbreakers, true guineas. They took over their piece of the city. 20 years after an Irishman couldn't get a fucking job, we had the presidency. May rest in peace. That's what the niggers don't realize. If I got one thing against the black chappies, it's this. No one gives it to you. You have to take it. That's what the niggers don't realize. If I got one thing against the black chappies, it's this. No one gives it to you. You have to take it.